Hi, friends. I wanted to share with you an anti-fascist devotion with the trees from Psalm 1. How do we remain grounded presences of love in a time of rising fascism in our society? And I would like to suggest that we have teachers all around us, and that as we learn to pay attention to these teachers and share presence with them, that we will grow in the groundedness that we need for our time. And I begin with the text from Psalm 1, where the poet says, "Blessed is the one who doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers, but their delight is in the Torah of the Lord. And on this Torah, this teaching, this way, they will meditate day and night. They will be like trees planted by rivers of water." The trees are our teachers for an anti-fascist spirituality that can ground us in love and take us into a new, fruitful future. And I'd like you to notice a few things with me about the trees. The first thing is that the trees are rooted in the soil, and the tree's roots dig deep, sink deep, bury deep into the darkness of the soil. They are going into a place that seemingly has no light, that may be very dense. There may be rocks and stones. And this is the work of the tree, to go downward before it goes upward. It is planted in the earth, and its vital sources of connection, tethering, belonging, are its roots that go downwards into the darkness of the earth, and this becomes its source of nutrition, its source of stabilization, its source of communication with other neighboring trees. Part of the paradoxical work that we have to do today, if we're going to embrace an anti-fascist, neighbor-loving way of following Jesus, is allowing ourselves to go downwards into the darkness, into the density, into the place where we cannot see clearly. And this can certainly feel like a falling, like a sinking, like a getting lost, like a being buried. It can feel a bit like a burial, a death process. Um, the spiritual teachers throughout the generations have called this dying before we die. And that's really a practice of learning to accept our mortality, our finitude, our limitations, the brilliance and brokenness of our bodies. The trees are our teacher in the work of grounding. Their roots go down into the soil. They allow themselves to disappear into the darkness, and that becomes its rootage, its plantation, its solid grounding. And then with this root system spreading out into the darkness, the trees, they rise up. And there's something just really so beautiful to me about the trees, that when they are firmly rooted, they enter into a radical flexibility. If you have ever watched trees in a windstorm, you will see the trees dancing. Um, the trees have an incredible agility, an incredible capacity for flexibility and movement. And when the wind gets really severe, the trees will even flail. It looks like they are, you know, almost chaotically moving backwards and forwards, and you wonder if these things are going to just blow over. But healthy trees that have a deep root system with that central trunk are able to engage in this wind dancing in severe weather, and it's their agility and their flexibility with the rootage underneath them that enables them to not only withstand, but to become sources of stability and grounding for the environment around them in extreme weather. And what we're seeing in our fascist times is a kind of extreme weather. Dietrich Bonhoeffer called it the gray on gray of the thunderstorm in his context. And we see a growing thunderstorm in our American society today, as well as in Ethiopia and obviously Russia, Ukraine, Palestine, Gaza, and other contexts. But we see a growing rigidity in this authoritarian politics where you are being asked to only see what your leader tells you to see. You're being asked to only hear what your leaders tell you to hear. You're being asked to only feel what your leaders tell you to feel. And when they're angry, you're supposed to be angry. When they are gleeful, you are supposed to be gleeful. Um, when they are certain, you are supposed to be certain. When they mysteriously just don't know, you're supposed to be ignorant. And we see this kind of growing rigidity in our society. And there was a German word for this as fascism was rising in Germany. It was called Gleichschaltung, and what it really means is alignment. Alignment was the idea that in this fascist society, religion, school curriculum, news media, artwork, family life, um, obviously politics, all of this was supposed to come rigidly into alignment with the fascistic leaders' um, speeches and tirades and prophecies, and then through him, through his apparatus of little leaders, everyone was supposed to get in line. The trees have a defiant independence from this way of rigidity, while they are firmly rooted, grounded, trunked in the earth. They are able to move with the wind and to remain flexible and adaptive. And this is what we need today. We need that capacity to move, to dance, and in some cases to flail. We are experiencing a time of escalated emotions. We experience fear, at least we're being told to. Um, what's going to happen to our country? What are those people going to do to us? Um, are we going to be able to make it through and survive? We're being goaded and inflamed to experience anger, that something precious is being taken from us, that we are being wronged, that we are being disrespected, that we're being robbed, occupied, invaded, and in some cases we are being invaded, but it's not so much by so-called foreigners as it is by federal agents. And of course, there's that profound emotion of grief that many of us are experiencing below the level of our fear, below the level of our anger. Grief is that emotion where we come in contact with our sadness, with our disappointment, with our sometimes only half-conscious awareness of pain. And the trees have the capacity to flex and flail in extreme weather patterns without cracking, without splitting open when they're healthy. They can move. And this is a time where those of us who are wanting to remain present and active and articulate in our fascistic times will need this flexibility, this adaptiveness, this agility, this capacity to dance and sometimes to flail. Um, I just got off a call with an old friend who just needed to spend some time crying, and he was talking about some of the pain in his family and his origin story and what he sees taking place in capitalist America and his own feelings of not being enough and the goading of our public figures for him to embrace some kind of macho power, so-called powerful um, hardness. And he just began to cry. And he reminded me that, yes, we're going to need to get to know these volatile emotions, these convulsive emotions, these windy emotions, these extreme weather pattern emotions of our fear, of our anger and rage, of our grief, of our sadness. And like the trees, we're going to need to learn how to move with the wind, but to remain grounded because our roots have done the work of digging deep into the darkness, deep into the soil, deep into what Václav Havel called the hidden sphere of life, or what Terrence Malick has simply called a hidden life. And this is really the work of becoming aware of our grief that is often layers below our anger, layers below our fear, even a layer below our shame. And shame is this very toxic, powerful emotion that tells us that we are not enough, that there's something wrong with us, that we are defective, um, that we are shit, that we should condemn ourselves, that we should hide ourselves, that we are not worthy of being seen or worthy of being loved or worthy of receiving gifts or worthy of time and attention. The tree's root work, its subterranean plunging into the darkness, is this work of becoming aware of the shame that lives inside of us and also the anger and the fear, and underneath all of that, the really rich black soil of our grief. So, blessed is the one who meditates on the way day and night. They shall be like a tree that is planted beside rivers of water, which bears fruit in season, and whose fruit doesn't wither. Another way that the trees are crucial teachers for an anti-fascist, neighbor-loving spirituality is the way that the trees remember. The trees are able to remember weather patterns and extreme events from previous times. And so when a new storm arises, the trees are not going through their first tree rodeo. They are familiar with and attuned to and prepared for this new storm because they have weathered previous storms. And for us today, this is the crucial work of memory, of remembering where we have come from. Here in the United States, a crucial act of memory could be remembering the upheavals of the civil rights movement, in which people, including Dr. King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and many thousands lost, as James Baldwin said, were assassinated. These people, as Dr. King, were called rabble rousers and bad names, and they lost their jobs, and their families thought that they were having some kind of mental illness. Their religious leaders told them that they were unfaithful, that they were unbiblical. Their neighbors told them that they were impatient and extreme, and that they were aggressive. Um, of course, the politicians and the political authorities told them that they were dangerous, that they were insurrectionary, that they were terrorists. The trees remember the extreme weather events of the past, so we need to learn from their work of memory in our own time of, okay, we are in our own civil rights moment now. We are in a time of moral rupture, and we can't really make it through this if we are pretending like this is the first go. This is part of a much, much larger, longer weather pattern in our 250-year history, which is really a much older history. The trees remember another crucial thing that the trees do is that they communicate with one another. The trees are in active communication with one another through their root systems that are in this kind of subterranean contact with one another. They also communicate with one another through the biological information that they release into the air that the wind carries to other trees and helps other trees understand what is taking place in the ecosystem. And this is a crucial time for us friends to be in communication with one another, to help one another understand what is taking place in our society, to check in with one another and ask how we are doing, how we are feeling, what we are needing, perhaps most of all, what we are grieving. Is there tears inside of us that we need to cry? Is there silence inside of us that we need to hold? Is there tiredness in us that needs to gain access to sleep, even when we feel very activated? Um, do we need groceries or legal counsel or mental health care? The trees are in communication with one another. And hi, Lynn. I hope you enjoy your walk in the woods. Your teachers are all around you there. Maybe give one a hug. Um, the trees share resources with one another. Some of the trees are able to absorb more moisture in their roots, and when a time of dryness comes, they are able to release that moisture and to water the trees that are around them. And this is a time, friends, where we are going to need to share resources with one another. We are going to need to be generous. Some of us have time that we can give to one another. Some of us have words of encouragement that we can give to one another. Some of us have the capacity to listen and to offer therapeutic care that we can give to one another, whether we're, a grandma or a friend or a pastor or rabbi or imam, or priest, or we are a licensed clinical therapist. Some of us are going to need to give money to one another. When you are arrested for the work of nonviolent direct action, this rooted, grounded, windy work, you may need legal counsel and legal care. You may need money to help pay for your fines and penalties and legal fees. It's a time where we need to learn from the trees to share with one another, to be generous, to not be independent and to not be dependent, but to learn to be interdependent. And this is what the beloved Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing. We're going to need to learn how to interbe at this time. And our tree neighbors, our tree friends, our tree siblings, they are just magnificent teachers of interbeing, of interdependence, of sharing with one another as the weather becomes extreme, whether that's because it's very dry or it's very hot or it's very cold or it's very, very wet. Their root systems can be mutually reinforcing in floods in times of extreme wetness and rain to help one another stay grounded if their own root system is not independently strong enough to sustain the tree. So, dear friends, anti-fascist devotion, neighbor-loving devotion, walking in the way of Jesus in a time of escalating emotion, authoritarianism, and danger. How do we do it? And I would suggest to you that we embrace the trees as our teachers. As J.R.R. Tolkien said so profoundly in The Lord of the Rings, the trees are waking up. And it's time for us to wake up with the trees and to embrace them as our teachers. And whether you're walking in the forest or you're looking out the window where you live, like I am, and seeing the trees move in the wind, or whether you're driving in a car or in a bus, um, the trees are almost always around us. And they can become these grounding presences that remind us of what our work is to do in this time. And I would simply say, in sum, our work is to root ourselves in the deep, dark soil of the earth, which is our work of embracing the mysterious presence of God, processing the complex, convulsive emotions that live inside of us, and finding the nurturance of our ancestors who have gone before us. The trees invite us into this way of being human by flexibly moving and dancing with the wind, sometimes violently flailing in the wind. And this is the gusts of anger and fear and shame and grief that we are going to learn to need to be able to move with. And we need that same kind of adaptability and flexibility in this time. And the trees are our teachers of how to practice nonviolent resistance to authoritarianism through the way that they share with one another, the way that they communicate with one another, and the way that they mutually ground one another when one of the tree's root systems may be in danger. And so, friends, yes, blessed is the one who doesn't walk in the way of the wicked, stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of scoffers. These are the kinds of personalities and characters that we're seeing in our society today. The psalmist is inviting us to see a progression here. Those who start off walking in the way of the wicked, they are amused by, entertained by, attracted by lies, cruelty, greed, lust, bigotry, what I call othering, seeing other people as unrelated or less than ourselves. And then the next move is that they sit. They begin to plant themselves in this kind of culture, this kind of religion, this kind of immorality. And then the final stage is that the middle stage is standing, this kind of willingness to inhabit this space. And the final stage that the psalmist describes is the sitting. They begin planting themselves in this way of evil. And the alternative is the one who meditates on the law of the Lord day and night. And as my old Hebrew teacher taught me over 20 years ago, that word meditate really means a kind of rocking. It's more of a body word than it is an intellectual or cognitive word. It's the movement of metabolizing and internalizing, of being deeply rooted in the way of God, which is the way of truth, love, and justice that allows the world to exist and for all of us to breathe. And the psalmist says, the poet says, that when we do this, we become like these trees that are planted by the rivers of water. They go deep into the darkness. They flexibly move in the atmosphere, and they do the work of communicating, of sharing, of co-rooting themselves to be able to give life to the soil, to be able to give breath and oxygen to the environment. Of course, we are co-breathing, we are conspiring with the trees all the time. We're breathing and they're absorbing our carbon dioxide. They're breathing and releasing fresh oxygen in the air. So again, you see this interbeing, this interdependence, this dialogical, conspiratorial way of existing with the trees here. The trees allow the landscape to remain stable in the midst of flood and earthquake. Let us, friends, become trees in this time. Let us wake up with the trees. And I would suggest that just the way to do this is in your everyday life when you see a tree, as Martin Buber said, don't see an it. But Buber talked about the I-it relationship, where you are the subject and the thing being observed is simply an object. It's a kind of lifeless, dead, material thing that you easily overlook or you exploit. Instead, Buber said, learn to have an I-thou relationship with the trees. Learn to see the trees as teachers, as speakers, as listeners, as witnesses, as presences in the world that are meant to guide us into the way of God, as the biblical poet said. So, yeah, this is hard, but it's also kind of wonderfully easy because the trees are they're just always around us. And every time we see a tree, we might just think, how do I do anti-fascist devotion in this time? How do I do neighbor love in this time? How do I do truth, justice, and freedom in this time? Well, it's going to look like the trees when we're healthy and grounded, down into the darkness, up into the light of the day with that flexible movement, and then with this often unseen subterranean sharing, communicating, mutual rooting that happens. Friends, I give thanks for you today, my fellow trees in this human forest that we inhabit on this good earth that God has made and blessed. And I think that I myself am about to head into some meetings and then take a walk in a forest to spend some time with the trees. I need some breathing with my teachers. I hope you are all well today. And I hope that at this moment, if you're seeing a tree or in the next few moments when you step outside or look through a window and you see the tree, see a teacher that is guiding you into the good way of anti-fascist, neighbor-loving, non-violent, ultimately hopeful spirituality. Grateful for you all and grateful to continue the journey. The trees are waking up.